We are back on the build phase. I'm your host, Mr. Ben, and on today's episode, I want to recap the weekend that was. We had a lot going on with Versus this weekend. Ups and downs, and I'm going to kind of confront, honestly, some of the criticism at least one of these things has received. And then I'd like to maybe talk about Midwinter. So let's start with the Flame On Showdown. So this was the first time we tried to do a fight night since, I think, August, maybe even July was the last fight night that we did. And while we've learned a lot along the way and we've smoothed out our process, there are a few things, particularly with the face cam portion, that we just weren't prepared for. The night before the Flame On Showdown, we got together in Discord and we messed around like with the order that people logged in and trying to figure out if there was a way for us to rearrange the camera placement Discord. And if there is, we could not figure it out. Because of this, we just kind of crossed our fingers and hoped that this wouldn't happen, where whether it was me here with my board, well, we don't know what's going to happen. We can't seem to. And we, of course, got the one camera arrangement that is the most confusing, the hardest to follow. And I don't know how to fix it. No matter what order we log in, it just never worked out. Another criticism that I think is completely valid is that we counts, specifically this face cam Discord account was created right before we did this. And apparently that puts a timer on that account that's shorter than, because this account never timed out. I never had an issue. But the account that was hosting my face video kept timing out. And while I tried to remember to like move the mouse, and so the camera dropping out, particularly when it's a thing where you want to see somebody's live reaction to something, that really sucks. We had planned for this to have commentary. We were going to have our commentary people maybe eat a few wings along the way to kind of add another layer of madness, and then we'd cut the mics into either myself or Carlos when we were eating a wing. The commentary it flat out didn't run. We did try to do a test run of it, and the night of, the machine that Carlos was using to host all of this simply couldn't keep up with it, and there was like a 30-second delay. We wouldn't even been able to really play cards. So ultimately the commentary team was just kind of hovering around in the back, not doing anything, but they were watching at least on my end, they were watching it live. And as such, you can hear me and Carlos a few seconds on delay coming through that stream, coming through on. So again, something we should have thought about. A lot was happening. I can only make the same excuse that we make every time. We're a bunch of volunteers. We're all figuring this out as we go. And while we're trying to bring the best quality entertainment product we can to the game, the bottom line is this is kind of a DIY. There's a punk rock element shot through all of this. So we're doing the best we can. Now, that being said, I did not know that these were going to be Carlos's cards until we sat down to play. I did not know that he did not have the fan slate was a real problem for me too. We even got together earlier than we ever had before because we anticipated that there was going to be some, because it was something we had never tried before with the extra cameras. We got together earlier than we typically do for a fight night, and still we couldn't get the thing off the ground on time. We couldn't really flow as smoothly as I wanted to. And ultimately, I think the final product, while it is entertaining, it was a fun evening, there were some rough edges. So to everybody who's let me know that, I hear you. For the most part, I think you're right. And at the end of the day, we're just some people trying to have some fun with the game of Versus. So there are some lessons I think we can take away from this particular fight night, but I can't go back and fix it at this point. And going forward, we're going to try to make all of our fight nights better. So mostly good time, if a somewhat painful time at this event. The randomness of never being able to get Krychek to actually hit the other MC was very frustrating, I will admit. But I hope everybody who witnessed this had a good time despite the hiccups and the kind of places where the gears ground a little bit. And all in all, I'm glad that we did it. If the ultimate end product, I'm not as proud of it as I would have liked to be. The theory that we had, the vision that we had for this was a little bit grander than we were ultimately able to pull off. And that is a disappointment to me. And I think the whole team Like, we all know when we don't get something right. It's not like we're putting out these live events. Honestly, if we recorded all this stuff in advance, it would be a lot more polished. But I think watching something live is part of the attraction. I do think there's a place in our community for pre-recorded things where we can get that higher degree of polish. This wasn't that. This was a hot mess, I will admit. So moving on, I want to talk about Midwinter. What a tremendous success. Quite to the contrary of what happened at the Flame On Showdown. Midwinter felt like everything ran well. Now, I know behind the scenes, Carlos has been very clear that there wasn't enough support staff. Him trying to do commentary and judge absolutely foreseeably was not possible. It was too rough. And there is some percent of feeling bad that I take on for that, because I had talked about how if they needed somebody on the desk, I would hop on the desk and I wouldn't play in the event. Well, we kind of had it set up so that I wasn't going to be needed on the desk, and I was like, great, I'm going to play. And by the time we realized that gap was there, I had so much invested time and energy into testing for the event that I don't want to drop. I did say prior to round, let's see, what was it, 5, I think, that if I picked up my third loss, I would drop and hop on commentary for the rest of the day. I ended up winning out the day, so I didn't do that. And, tremendous credit to Ralph Cole for essentially holding down an entire day of casting without anybody to consistently bounce the conversation off of. That's really hard. I can personally attest how hard it is to keep yourself both on track, but also not repetitive. And there's a reason I do a solo show, and it's probably because I talk too much. But it is a lot easier because you can serve each other things up. If there's something, I'm thinking that I need to say this next, but I need to finish the thought I'm on, sometimes that thought goes. But if it's somebody else who's talking, you can make a note, you can ask them questions. Having a co-host makes this stuff a lot easier to keep the train on the track. So jumping into how the event ran, I did definitely encounter a few folks who maybe needed to work on their camera angle a little bit, and I'm not going to put anybody on blast, and I'm sure my camera angle wasn't perfect all day long. I actually had multiple times throughout the event where my camera fritzed out, and I was on the exact same internet as Joe and John, and they didn't have that problem. So on my end, it would look like the other guy froze up, and on the other guy's end, it would look like he froze up. But I think both times it was determined that I was the one who needed to leave and come back, or maybe we both did. To be honest, it was a long day with a lot of tough decisions and really high level competition. I had a great time for the most part. So I just gonna run down my day, maybe pull up some decks and talk about them. So my very first match was against James Monroe, who BPL Season 6 champion, going to be in the Invitational we have coming up here soon. And I should have probably went ahead and pulled his deck up first, shouldn't I? So he was playing Death. Now, this was a matchup I was prepared for, and I will do a little patting of myself on the back here in that I got almost the exact meta that I predicted over the course of my day. Now, I know if you look at the total numbers of main characters, my meta predictions were off. I thought that Death and Harrigan would be the top 2 played. It was actually Harrigan and Quake who were the top 2 played, and then Death and Red Skull both tied at 2, which I thought was very strange to see anybody play Red Skull, and one of those somebody's happened to be Rob Smallwood, and we all know how that ends. So if you look at James's Death list here, there is one card that is not included that is really important and defining of the matchup, and that is the 2-cost Cosmic Cube. James apparently, and I don't want to misquote him, but we kind of talked at the table after the match, and or even during the match, I think he mentioned that he just made a mistake. It was late Monday night. He sent the list to Carlos. He had been working on a few different ones, and when he looked at the list, actually put the cards together, he realized, I left the Cosmic Cube out. I think that's a defining card. I think the Harrigan Death matchup absolutely comes down to, can Harrigan get the nullifier, or can Death get the Cosmic Cube first? Being that he did not have the Cosmic Cube, I was in a very comfortable position, I thought, after looking at his list. He did, however, play Ronin on turn 2. He called Soup Happens, and he got one out of my hand. Next turn, so my turn 4, I drew into another one. I was like, okay, now I'm protected again. His turn 4, he played Supergiant, and I had to throw another Soup Happens away. Then he played, let me think of the order here. So I threw that one away because of Supergiant, but I either drew into another one right then, or it was over the course of the next couple turns. I didn't write down turn numbers in my notes, so you know what it is. So he's activated Ronin twice. He successfully got one card. On his turn, I think 6, he played another Supergiant, and I had to throw 8 cards away, including that copy. So now 3 of the Soup Happens in the deck are in the KO pile. And going into my turn, did he play the Ronin the same turn as the Supergiant? So he played another Supergiant and threw that one out of my hand, and then another Ronin. I can't remember if it was the same turn or in subsequent turns, but either way, he paid for that Ronin for his third Ronin activation and called... Oh, there was another Ronin activation in there after the Supergiant that missed, and he called Soup Happens again. Now, he basically had a 50-50. There was one copy of that in the deck. He had one wound left, and there was one copy of Nullifier. And I show him my hand, and I've got the Nullifier. But he had called the wrong one. So in that game, I saw Ronin trigger 3 times. He got one card successfully, and that last call, it was a 50-50, and he made the wrong call, and I was able to push the wounds through. So that was tough. If he had the red cube in there, this could have been a totally different game. I mean, if you look at his list here, the only thing these red locations are here for is for that red cube. That's it. So unfortunately, this is one of the things that can occur when you're kind of pressured, when there's too much time pressure on you, is that you can end up with mistakes in your last minute deck submission. I think Origins one year turned in a deck list that had one too many cards. I actually had the right number of cards in my deck, but I just miswrote the deck list. Maybe it was one too few. I don't remember. But either way, my list was off, and Chad had to come up to me like, dude, what's going on here? Did you just submit an illegal deck? I was like, no, I'm going to do that in 2021. So my next round of the day was against Patrick Lenahan. Now, Patrick and I play tested a ton in the run-up to this event. And, you know, thanks to Patrick for taking the time to play a bunch of games with me. And this I knew was going to be bad. He had been on the Harrigan Power Loader power-up variant from at least the beginning of me and him playing. This was one of the earliest decks that he played against me, and he circled around it more or less the entire time that we were testing. And this is not a bad variant. I do think that the Power Loader power-up variant makes you much, much weaker in the death matchup, but he didn't have that much death in the format. There was only 2 deaths in the format, and there were 7 Harrigans, 9 Harrigans, bunch of Harrigans. So the power-up Power Loader variant of Harrigan is much better in the mirror. You get bigger faster. The only way the mini kind of the less, so the reason it's better against death or worse against death is because the power-ups put more characters in the KO pile. That's something death wants. That's something Harrigan, you're getting a +1 that can be knocked off of you, and you're giving death a permanent +1 that can't be knocked off of her. Save something like this or this. So that's kind of why the power-up one doesn't do as well against death. But against the other Harrigans, you have those power-ups which let you put more counter. It's another avenue, another stream of +1 counters on your Harrigan, which means you're likely to level faster, because if I only have door swings both ways, and you have door swings both ways and power-ups and power loaders, you're going to be able to get Harrigan's attack pumped pretty big even before he levels, and certainly after. Now, the answer in the what I would call the minigun variant, and yes, there's miniguns in both, so it is a little bit confusing, but within our testing group, this is kind of how we thought of it. There was the Harrigan whose answer to death was double attacking with miniguns, and that's actually the answer to a bunch of things in the format. That's kind of the key gameplay loop. The key line in this deck is attacking twice with Harrigan and just chewing the opponent's characters down to nothing. You just grind them out. That's how you want this deck to work. Now, in a mirror, because generally Harrigan isn't relying on putting a bunch of characters on board, he's kind of the big, beefy, cheese stands alone kind of deck list. This power loader you don't have to worry about the minigun so much in the mirror, but the power loader is what can really jump you ahead. Now, the answer to this for the minigun Harrigan is the same thing that the answer to a ton of things is in this format, and that is Soup Happens and Nullifier. So going into this matchup, I didn't feel great. Like, this is my nightmare matchup. Like, what I was hoping is that if I saw other Harrigans, they were going to be tuned to fight death and not tuned for the mirror. And they were all tuned for the mirror, everyone that I saw. So let's see. Did I write down what turn this ended? No, I didn't. But he souped me twice. He got his minigun out. He got 2 power loaders out. I don't feel like this game was even that close. I feel like Patrick kind of just ran me over. And, I mean, that's all she wrote. So I go into game 3, and I am 1-1. And I face off against Giuseppe. Now, Giuseppe I played in Sealed League the other week, and he was having some trouble with like the portrait landscape orientation on his phone in the camera, and I couldn't help him at that time. But during Flame On Showdown testing, we figured out what the problem was. So that was cool. I don't bring that up to be like, oh, this guy had a problem with his camera, haha. It's more like, hey, we're all in this together. If we all have better setups, I'm still learning too. Like, I try to help people, and when we learn things, like just hitting that portrait landscape button on your phone makes a big difference. So this version is, I think, the only time I saw he couldn't see me all day. Oh, so in Sealed League, he got really unlucky. So I joked before we started this game that I used up all my luck on the Sealed League games. Shout out to Keith McGee for that, by the way. That don't matter. And now here at the table where it does matter, dude's going to wreck me. So obviously the play he wants is to be able to stand together when I try to play Who's Next on my Harrigan. That's the play. Your Harrigan gets to attack twice, mine doesn't. And that is a really